No one knows who he is, what his powers even are. I'm telling you, the dude's a blank slate.
Need help finding your way out?
Thomas Godolkin spearheaded a research program called Project Odessa.
The biggest mystery of Gen V Season 2 has been solved, and the answer is something none of us saw coming. I mean, sure, there were rumors, and the character himself was too mysterious to not have a shocking origin. After all, Cipher knew too much about things he had no business knowing, didn't he? He's 10 steps ahead of everybody, and he's actively supporting Homelander's cause to make the world super-abled. But for the longest time, we couldn't figure out his motivation until we saw the contents of his vault in Episode 4, and then things started to fall into place. In this video, we'll be discussing Cipher's real identity and his origins, and answer the question that people have been asking since Episode 1. Is Thomas Godolkin still alive? Because trust us, that figures into the confusion about Cipher's origins. We're going to clear all that up and more, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
You'd be like heaven to touch.
At first, people thought he was Thomas Godolkin. Ever since Cipher was introduced, people speculated that he was Thomas Godolkin himself, primarily because of the opening sequence of Episode 1 and the in-depth knowledge he possesses about soups. Cipher set up the Hero Optimization class specifically because he knew everything there is to know about how Compound V works, and he's connected to some of Vaught's top-secret facilities. For instance, Cipher was at Elmira, a Vought detention facility for quote-unquote troubled adults, but by this point, you should know that all Vought facilities are just bases for human experimentation. When Marie and her friends were imprisoned at Elmira, they saw Cipher there, holding a clipboard, taking notes as they were tortured day after day. Cipher's obsession with soups sounded exactly like the former dean Indira Shetty's description of why Thomas Godolkin created God U in the first place, to see what made soups tick. She claimed that the school was there to study the students, not vice versa, and Cipher acting like a lab geek for soups does line up with that description. Then, there's the fact that Episode 1 of Gen V Season 2 started with a flashback to the Odessa incident, where several Vought scientists died after injecting themselves with a syringe with what looks like Compound V, and the only man to have seemingly survived was Thomas Godolkin. He tried to get the scientists to stop, but he failed and they set the room on fire. The last we saw of Thomas Godolkin was him passing out shortly before he hit the fire alarm, but we never quite saw him die. It's possible he had a last wind after all, or someone came to save him, but the ambiguous ending of that flashback scene was intentional because it introduced the mystery that seemed to explain Cipher. People became even more suspicious of him when he started the Hero Optimization classes because he seemed to have a better understanding of everyone's powers than even they did, and he used very specific language that displayed his expertise on the subject. Aside from Frederick Vought, Godolkin would have been the highest authority on the scientific aspects of Compound V because he worshipped Vought and was his closest disciple. In fact, Godolkin was handpicked to lead the Odessa project and God U by Frederick Vought. That's how close their bond was. And the final piece of evidence was believed to be the image of Cipher holding Marie as a newborn child, right as we discovered what Project Odessa really was. Cipher doesn't look like he's aged a single day between Marie's birth and the present timeline of the series, which means A, he's much older than he looks, and B, he's a soup. Only soups can have such unnaturally long lifespans, like Stormfront, who lived for close to a century and outlived her own daughter, Chloe. Thomas Godolkin was in charge of the Odessa project. He was looking into ways to improve and control soups, and when he burst into that room that day in 1967, he was trying to stop his fellow scientists from injecting a substance that wasn't ready. That implies that he knew what was wrong with it, and he'd probably injected himself with the good stuff already. If we consider that to be true, then Cipher being Thomas Godolkin does make sense, except there's one problem with that theory. We have confirmation that Godolkin, like Vought himself, was definitely human. If a guy like Thomas Godolkin was still alive, the landscape of this series would have been entirely different, because for starters, Stormfront would have had an extremely powerful ally. It's implied that Stan Edgar was only able to rise in power because he systematically eliminated the competition, and that the current corporate nature of Vought is his doing. Thomas Godolkin, as a fanatic follower of Frederick Vought, would have been in Stan's way, so his elimination must have been a priority. It's possible that the Odessa incident was even orchestrated by Stan, but that's a conspiracy theory for another day. The reason we brought up Godolkin's humanity is to emphasize the fact that the main point of soups even being a thing was to unite them against all other races that the master race despised. Thomas was not only a fan of the Nazi Party, he was apparently a KKK member as well, as evidenced by the KKK suit we discover in his secret archive. We don't think his racist butt would have allowed Stan Edgar to get that high up in the pecking order, and to top it all off, the two look completely different. Thomas Godolkin was in his mid-40s when the Odessa incident occurred. Cipher appears to be perpetually in his late 30s, and plastic surgery wouldn't explain the face change, neither would a duplication power. If you copy someone's face, does that stop you from aging because you don't age? That's not possible because duplication powers have certain limits. For all those reasons, we think that Cipher being Thomas Godolkin doesn't make sense, even though the hints seem to be pointing in that direction. It was sort of creepy how he told Marie exactly what to do in order to control her powers, because that's the kind of knowledge only someone who has studied soups for a very, very long time should have. But that doesn't mean we didn't suspect him of being connected to Thomas Godolkin, because there is evidence that the two had contact with one another.
Well done, Marie. We have work to do.
We suspected he was connected to Thomas in episode 3. When Emma and Polarity broke into Thomas Godolkin's secret archive, the thing that caught our eyes the most was the picture of a group of 4 standing at a cross burning. This picture being in that vault can mean only one thing. One of those people was Thomas Godolkin himself. It's very likely that Frederick Vaught appears in that picture as well, considering half of that archive was a memorial altar to Vaught and his legacy, but that left 2 people behind. Of the 4, one is definitely a man because this person is wearing his tighty whities proudly, so if that's Thomas and one of the others is Frederick, who are the rest? We thought one of them must be Stormfront Shirley because she was more dedicated to the white cause than anyone else we've seen. That leaves person number 4, and we initially thought that that person might be Cipher. It would make sense considering the fact that Cipher is one of the most vocal supporters of Homelander's homicidal soups first ideology. He started the hero optimization class to create soldiers for Homie's army, and he views humans as subpar creatures. Cipher shares a lot of the original ideology of Vaught, but with a new soup-colored coat, which makes us think that maybe he was also a test subject of Frederick's, just like Stormfront. That would mean he's even older than we can imagine, and he's most likely the 4th person in the KKK group pick. It's pretty clear that Cipher is an OG racist. He doesn't even hesitate from dressing down the soups that don't perform the way he wants them to. He's like a commander or something based on his behavior, and if he was actually alive during World War II, then that would explain his superior intelligence regardless of whether he's human or not. And that was a big twist that episode 4 tried throwing at us, because in that episode, we were told that Cipher doesn't have Compound V in his system. This information comes from Marie, who unintentionally read his blood while training to evolve her powers, and this completely disproved, well, everything. If Cipher is human, then he couldn't have been in that group photo, and he sure as hell shouldn't have been at Marie's birth, looking exactly how he does nearly 20 years later. So, what is he? Is he Thomas Godolkin? Is he an associate of Thomas Godolkin's? Was he a Nazi intelligence officer, or does his intel come from a more mythical source? That became clear at the end of episode 4 when we realized that, yes, Cipher is a soup and Godolkin is his last name, he's just not Thomas Godolkin. The revelation of the vault and Cipher's real identity. He's Thomas Godolkin's son. Towards the end of episode 4 of Gen V Season 2, multiple mysteries were solved at once. Early on, we were given a guided tour of Cipher's home courtesy of Kate Dunlap, and she noticed that there was a vault in there. The vault looked heavy-duty too, which means that whatever was in it had to be Cipher's secret. When Kate and Jordan broke into his home in episode 4, they found a severely burned man in a special chamber that was seemingly keeping him alive, and this was the shocking turning point we didn't see coming. That's because that severely burned man is clearly Thomas Godolkin, and Cipher later tells Kate that she had the pleasure of meeting his father. This means that Cipher is the son of the founder of God U, and that actually makes everything fall into place. The 4 people in that KKK group pick were likely Thomas, Frederick, and their respective wives. Frederick's daughter, Chloe, lived for close to a century, so she was likely quite young when that apple tree picnic was shared by her and her parents. If Thomas Godolkin also had a son of her age, then it would make sense that the kid injected himself with Compound V after his papa was nearly burned to death and became one of the most formidable minds on the entire planet. We should have known that Cipher was Thomas's son when Marie's Aunt Pam called him Dr. Gold. Anagrams are a very common and tropey method of hiding genealogy, and we skipped that mostly because people were using it to prove that Cipher himself was Godolkin. But the revelation of Thomas's still living body and Cipher's heritage, and the fact that he keeps calling Marie's powers miraculous, leads us to believe that we finally know what Odessa is actually all about. I mean, yeah, Odessa was created as the ultimate answer to any problems that Supes might encounter on a biological level, but Cipher's personal goal must be to use Marie to heal his dad somehow. If Marie is indeed capable of reinvigorating cells and making them multiply rapidly, then she'll be able to fix his dad, and we don't know if we want Thomas Godolkin in the 21st century. The guy followed Frederick Vought willingly and literally went to clan meetings with him, and Cipher revealed the truth about God U to Marie during her special training when he said that Thomas Godolkin wanted to perfect Supes, not study them for their weaknesses. That's something that probably started when Stan Edgar took over because he realized that Supes were a bigger liability than anyone cared to admit. Stan was the kind of pragmatic businessman who believed in holding both the carrot and the stick, but he was getting desperate to use the latter over the course of the series. In one of his best scenes, he admitted to Dakota Bob that turning the Supes into heroes was a massive mistake and that he aimed to be out of the superhero business in 5 years. Sure, he seemed unaware of the soup virus Vicky and her boyfriend Samir cooked up, but he was already considering options for neutralizing the Supes already under his command. For a guy like Thomas Godolkin, that would have been unacceptable, and if he was alive for a decent amount of time and able to pass on his own ideals to his son Cipher, then that puts everything right where it should be. Thomas was an ardent follower of Vought, and his supremacist thoughts were imparted to his son. That's why Cipher believes so heavily in creating soldiers, not students. He wants a super-abled version of the Hitler Youth under him, and ironically enough, his dad would have known the actual head of the Hitler Youth back in the day. Also, Cipher being Godolkin's son also kind of explains why Marie didn't sense Compound V in his bloodstream, because there is a possibility that the original formula isn't the one that's used for all the modern-day Supes. Either that, or Cipher's ability allows him to mask his V in some form, because Episode 4 showed us that he's clearly a Supe. Whichever it is, the reason this revelation matters so much is that it makes Cipher Stormfront's replacement. After she died, Vought tried to steer away from the white agenda hard, and it was because Homelander started rating highly with conservative Christians that their evangelical audience exploded onto the world stage. Nearly every person working with Homelander is a white is right kind of person, and that can take the Supe project off the rails. The reason Frederick Vought brought V to America was to one day create an army of Supes that would be able to see the Reich's ambition through to the end. None of the dollars and cents bullcrap that Stan Edgar speaks of was important to Frederick, only a world where humans were dominated by Supes. Homelander is currently on the path that will finally realize this dream of his, but he clearly needs some direction. Homie, left to his own devices, is a bomb waiting to self-destruct, but when he's surrounded by capable lieutenants like Sister Sage and now Cipher, he can channel all his power into fulfilling his goals, and that's terrifying. Homelander's biggest weakness is how fickle he usually is, apart from his crippling need for love and affection, of course. So easily does he get bored that Vought once tried telling Becca everything will be fine eventually because Homie was bound to lose interest. But we've since learned that that's not the case for things that matter to him, and world domination most certainly matters to him. He's been stoking that god complex of his ever since the first episode of The Boys, and now he has the sanctioned authority to put America under Supe control. It never made sense to us that Thomas Godolkin would work to undermine Supes by probing their weaknesses because he was a Vought fanatic. If anything, he'd want to make them stronger and ultimately natural because all Supes were created before Ryan and Marie came along. Ryan is the first Supe to have been born through the traditional procreation process, and Marie seems to have been conceived with Cipher's help. If Supes can actually be born instead of being created, then they've become racially perfect beings, and they actually don't need to rely on humans anymore. The reason Homelander was shocked that he had a son was because all those who had Compound V in their systems couldn't conceive. Impotence seems to be a side effect of high doses of V, but Homelander himself was conceived through artificial insemination, so there were signs that Supes were becoming a part of the natural order. With Ryan, Vought's myth about Supes being born instead of being created has actually become the truth, and the only way forward for the racists that want to see them rule the world is to have more kids like him. Cipher being Thomas Godolkin's son and secretly running Odessa to give birth to Supes as opposed to creating them through injections is the most disgusting natural selection analogy we've ever seen. But I mean, there's not much that's associated with the name Vought that doesn't bring a visceral reaction out of us these days. This reaction might have just explained the endgame of the entire franchise, and if you guys hadn't put that together yet, well then, you heard it here first. Marvelous verdict. But as for this video, we're afraid that's all we've got for you, so this is where we're going to part ways with you guys. Let us know your thoughts about Cipher's real identity and true motives in the comments down below, because we know you guys want to discuss this further, just like us. We're dying to talk about this twist, and we want to jump in on the discussion, so don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Marvelous Videos for more Gen V and the Boys content, and we'll see you guys real soon. Until next time, stay safe and don't sign up for classes that sound like gladiatorial exercises, because you never know whether you'll live or die, and worse, you might discover things that are best left secret, which Marie Moreau is about to find out.